So for many empty nesters like us, we have a pet. And as we thought about moving abroad, we also needed to think about what it meant to move our dog Riley abroad. And in this video, we'll talk about the process that you need to go through in order to get your dog from the US to a country like Portugal. Hi, I'm Matt. And Dawn is normally here, but she's taking the day off, and we are the unretirees. And last year, as I was approaching the traditional retirement age, we knew that we didn't want to retire, but we were also not ready to put off our dream of living abroad and traveling the world either. So today we live and work from the Silver Coast of Portugal, and this channel is about living abroad, remote work, and travel over 50. We sure would like it if you liked this video, subscribe to this channel, and click the bell notification so that you never miss another video. You can also follow us on Instagram at The Unretirees, as well as sign up for our weekly newsletter that's absolutely free, and we'll leave the link to both of those in the description below. So when you are planning to move abroad, there is a relatively clear process in most countries, and certainly it's true for Portugal, which is where we live, of knowing the documents that you need to pull together, how you set up an appointment with the consulate for your visa meeting, actually getting your visa, when you move, the process of meeting with the local immigration office in order to get your residency card, all of those things are relatively clearly set out. But traveling with pets has its own complications, and in fact, in some ways, it's a little crazier. And that certainly is true here for Portugal. And in this video, we're going to talk about the 4 stages of getting your pet to successfully the EU, and specifically into Portugal for us. So the first is the conversations and how you work with the vet in the United States. The second stage is collecting all of the documents that you need in order to make this work. The third is actually the transportation, the physically getting the dog, or in our case, the dog, the animal, from the United States to wherever your destination country is. And then the fourth is getting an EU passport for your animal. So those are the 4 stages that we're going to go through. Let me also call out the admins for the Facebook group, Americans and Friends PT, and they do a fabulous job. And in this Facebook group, there are files that we have relied on to help us get our visa, to help us get settled once we're here, and to help us move our pet from the United States here to Portugal. If you're not moving to Portugal, there probably is a Facebook group that helps navigate the process of moving from the United States to that other country. And if there isn't, you may want to start one. But in those groups, they probably have information and files or suggestions from people who have gone before you. So rely on those. So first, let's talk about working with your vet. So the first and most important part of this is you need to have a vet who is on the USDA certification list. And we'll leave a link here in the description below so that you can check if your vet is on that list or not. And if not, you're going to need to find a different vet to help you through this process, which was our case. The vet that we used back in Connecticut was a great vet. We loved the vet, but was not on the USDA certified list. And so he was not going to be able to help us. So we needed to find a new vet specifically for this purpose, have the pet records moved over to that new vet, and through a couple of sessions, be successful at getting what we needed in order to move the dog. So there are 3 things that you need while you're working with your vet in order to move your pet. The first is, well, your pet's going to need a microchip. The second is your pet's going to need to have a rabies shot within a certain timeline. And then the third is you're going to need to get a health certificate. So let's talk about each of these really quickly. So first, the microchip. Now, you may have already had your pet microchipped, but it may not be the microchip that you need. In Europe, they require a 15-digit microchip that is ISO 11784/ISO 11785 approved, and I have no idea what any of that means other than the chip that our dog had did not work for what we were trying to do. So he had to get a microchip. Now, it is important in this process that the microchip is the thing that you do first. And it's weird, and I don't understand exactly why, but you need to do the microchip first. Even if you're getting the microchip and the rabies shot in that same vet appointment, they want you to do the microchip first. So you need to get that microchip implanted no less than 21 days from your travel to Portugal. So you've got to think about the timing of that. And the other thing that you need is you need to get a microchip certificate from your vet, a certificate that just says, we implanted the microchip, here's the code, and here's the information about the pet. So those are the things that you need for the microchip. The second thing that you need is a rabies shot. Now, it seems weird because probably like you, our dog had 3-year rabies shots and he was not due one. But in Portugal, or to get the dog to Portugal, the rabies shot needs to be administered no more than a year ago, and it needs to be administered at least 21 days before your travel. So for us, what that meant was he needed another rabies shot. Even though he didn't really need one, he needed to get one for the sake of this. You need to have the microchip done first, then the rabies shot, and then on the rabies certificate, they indicate the new microchip number on that. So the third thing that you need is a health certificate. Now the health certificate is issued actually from the USDA, but your vet is the one who requests that health certificate and then shepherds it through the process. So on a separate visit with the vet, we had an exam done so that Riley could have a health certificate issued. Now the health certificate is issued by the USDA, but it's some crazy timing, and this was actually the most stressful part. It may have been the most stressful part of this entire month. So the crazy timing is that the USDA is the one who issues the health certificate, but you cannot request it, or the vet cannot request the USDA health certificate more than 10 days before the date of your travel. For us, we were traveling on a Tuesday, so 10 days before would have been on a Saturday. So obviously our vet was closed on Saturday, closed on Sunday. Our vet was off on Monday. So we had our appointment with the vet the Tuesday before we traveled. So 7 days before we traveled. So we sort of felt like we lost 3 days. The vet does an exam. If the vet feels like the animal is fine, then they request a USDA health certificate. Now the USDA health certificate is not issued until no more than 72 hours from the time that you are leaving. Now, again, we're leaving on a Tuesday, so 72 hours before that would have been Saturday. So they're not going to issue on a Saturday. They don't issue it on Sunday. So here it is. It's Monday the day before, and they finally issue it in Monday morning. And we need to have that physical copy that with the embossed seal on it, the raised seal on it, when we arrive in Portugal. So this is, touchy. So we had arranged for that to be FedExed. Fortunately, our vet shepherds the whole thing through the process, but we were still very nervous. They sent us a photocopy of the certificate on Monday. They then dropped it in a FedEx envelope, they being the USDA in Albany, New York, and shipped it to us. And we ended up getting that on Tuesday late in the morning, and we were probably within an hour or 2 hours from heading out to the airport for our flight on Tuesday early evening. So it was very touch and go. And if we did not get that certificate, if for whatever reason it was lost or late, we would not have been able to fly that day. It's crazy. It was just nerve-wracking. Anyway, it did all work out. We received the health certificate. That was perfect. So those are the 3 things that you need: a microchip, a rabies shot, and the health certificate while you're working with the vet. So then the second stage of this is you need to collect all your documents. Now the documents that you need to collect would be all the vaccination records of your pet. You need the new microchip certificate. You need the new rabies proof that reflects the new microchip ID on it. You need to have the USDA health certificate that you're going to get. And you also need to have the pet arrival form. At least in Portugal, there's something called a pet arrival form. Basically the form that says, here's the dog, here's the breed of dog, here's how much the dog weighs, here's how the dog is arriving, and what time the dog is going to be arriving to the airport in Portugal. And so you collect all of these documents. You're going to need these physical documents when you arrive in Portugal, but you also need to email them to the vet at your port of entry 48 hours before you arrive in Portugal. Every port of entry has a vet that is there before you can actually enter Portugal. And so At the Lisbon airport, it's in the baggage claim area. He or she is in the baggage claim area, and you've got to take your pet to the vet before they will release your pet. So you need all of these certificates, all these documents for that, and you need to have emailed that vet 48 hours before. So now let's talk about transporting the pet, which for us was incredibly complicated. Now look, it's very simple, or it's much simpler if you have a small dog or a cat that fits into a carrier that slides under your seat at the airplane. It's an in-cabin situation. It's much easier than what I'm going to describe, but our dog is about 50 pounds and therefore was too big to fit under the seat. We needed to fly him, we flew him as checked baggage. The challenge was trying to figure out an airport or an airplane that would allow us to do that. So we normally would fly Delta back and forth from New York to Lisbon, and so we booked tickets on Delta, only to find out later for international flights they don't allow customers to arrange to check in pets as luggage. They will take pets on their international flights, but only if they are arranged for through a professional pet transportation company. We did check into a pet transportation company. There's several of them who will either help get your animal from an airport to an airport, or even an animal from your front door to the new front door of your destination country. Honestly, for us, it was just too expensive. It was several $1,000s to, I think the quote was $4,000 or $5,000 to get our dog from New York to the Lisbon airport, which was more than we wanted to spend. There are other people who will charter a plane or partially charter a plane, and you will, if you're in this process, you'll see that there are people who will charter planes and they will try to arrange several people who are trying to transport a pet from the US to Portugal or a destination country. And the great thing about a charter is, of course, is that you can have your dog, no matter how big your dog is, in the in-cabin seat next to you, sitting with you while you're on the plane. Easier thing for the dog, it's an easier thing for you, but it's not an easier thing for your wallet. It's, as we priced this out, it was 10 grand. Now we know somebody who transported their pooch this way and they loved it, but we weren't willing to spend $10,000 on it. So we were left then trying to figure out an alternative way to get our dog checked while we traveled on that same flight. And so we found that an airline called SATA Azores, the Azores airline, that they do pet transportation. They allow customers to check their pets as luggage for international flights. And so I contacted them and they said, well, we can't tell you whether it works or not unless you actually buy the ticket. So we bought tickets to fly from JFK to Lisbon, and there was a layover in Madeira. So we bought the tickets, I called them up and they said, oh yeah, we can get your dog to Madeira, but we can't get your dog from Madeira to Lisbon. So obviously that wasn't going to work. So we canceled those flights as well. And then through more research, we found that TAP, T-A-P Airlines, which is the Portugal national airline, actually allows customers to check their dogs as checked baggage. And so we were able to buy tickets. We were able to arrange for the pet. Actually, at the time that we booked the tickets online, there was an option just to book a dog as well and give the size of the dog and all the other stuff. So we booked it. I think for TAP it cost maybe $400 more to fly the dog as checked baggage, but honestly it was worth it to have the dog at the airport with us and be able to have him at the airport in Lisbon as well. But there are a set of rules that every airline has for international pet transport, and depending on the airline that you use, you really need to dig into those rules to make sure that you don't get turned away when you go to check in on your important flying date. For TAP, they have a special requirement for a certain type of approved crate for international travel. The crate needed to be a specific size for the dog our size. So there's certain measurements that you take for the dog, and then there's certain measurements you take for the crate. They need to make sure that the dog can stand up and turn around and still have plenty of room in the crate. So it ends up being a bigger crate than you would expect that you would want to have for your dog, but honestly, you just have to do what you got to do to get the dog from New York to Lisbon. This was moving day, of course. So at the airport, not only do we have this big crate with our 50-pound dog in it, we have an incredible amount of luggage along with us. We then checked in our luggage and checked in our dog. At the check-in counter, the agent needed to have all of the documents around the dog. Now, I know that there's likely going to be some disagreement with what I'm about to go into, but this has to do with whether or not to sedate your pet for the flight in some way. And for us, it was our plan to not sedate Riley for the flight. But when we had our appointment with our vet, Our vet was very clear that the risks of sedation were very, very small, and that there were different ways to do it. And so she prescribed a mild sedative for the dog. And then she also suggested that we test the sedative out a few days before we travel. Just give the dog a dose of the sedative and see how he reacted. And if he reacted poorly, then we could take him to the vet. And if he reacted fine, just got a little drowsy, then you knew it was safe for the airplane. And so we did use that. Now, it didn't knock the dog out. There's no question about that. He was still active in the crate, but it did make him a little more relaxed, which for us was important. The dog, Riley, was a rescue dog. And even though we had had him at this point for 2.5 years, he was still a little skittish around certain things. And of course, an airport is loud and strange and all kinds of noises and people. And so this, I think, helped take a little bit of the edge off the skittiness for him and made his flight a little more comfortable. Once we turned him over to the TSA, we then were able to go through our own TSA security check, get to the gate, hop on the plane, and then make our way to Lisbon and hope that he was on the plane with us. And sure enough, he was on the plane with us. When we arrived at the Lisbon airport, we got our bags at the baggage claim. We picked up our dog at the pet collection area within baggage claim. And then we made our way over to the vet. Now, the vet at the Lisbon airport is inside of baggage claim. And so you just go, you check in, and then when it's your turn, they review the emails that they have to make sure that they got all your documents. They then compare the documents that you email to the documents that you have in real life to make sure that specifically the health certificate has that embossed raised seal on it. For the dog, let the dog out and do the examination right there. If everything's okay, then they have their own document that they fill out and they sign and hand to you, and then that becomes an important document to show to the customs agent as you are leaving the baggage claim and customs area to show that that dog is acceptable to Portugal. And so once you get through customs, your dog is now a Portugal resident. So the last part of this, and this is optional, is getting an EU passport for your pet. Now for us, we were planning to travel outside of Portugal and to travel into other EU countries, and so it was important for us to have an EU passport for Riley. And it's a pretty simple process. So once you get to your destination country, and for us, once we got to Portugal, of course, you're gonna wanna find a reputable local vet anyway. And so in your first appointment with that vet, you can just let them know that you need to get an EU passport. And it's a very simple process. So they make sure that the vaccination records and that the vaccinations are all up to date. They make sure that they mark down the microchip code. They take the breed of the dog, the weight of the dog, all the important data, take a picture of the dog. And then after a few hours, they put together an EU passport. We actually picked ours up the following day. And it looks just like your passport, or very similar to your passport. It's got all the information and stamps and things like that in it. And so you just need to make sure that every time you cross a border that you, with your dog, you have that passport along with you. We've never taken the dog on a flight. All of this has been traveling over the border in a car. And honestly, it's a little bit surprising here in the EU that there's really no border checks at all between like Spain and Portugal or between Spain and France. It's questionable whether we actually needed it, but should anything have happened, we would have needed to have it. And so it's important to have it. Now, certainly if you're gonna hop on an airplane, you're gonna need this EU passport. And so it's a useful thing to have. So those are the 4 steps, working with your vet, collecting the documents, transporting your pet, and getting the EU passport. All told, for us, it probably cost a little more than $1,000 to move our pet from point A to point B. But certainly it was a lot less than the $5,000 or so it would have to hire a pet transport company, or the 10 grand to be part of a charter to move our pet from point A to point B. So we were satisfied with the $1,000 fee. Of course, some people, they would prefer to leave a pet with another family member or to try to rehome a pet, and we would have missed having our dog with us here in Portugal. So I'm glad that we did that. But if you would like to find out more about the things that we miss and do not miss about living in the United States, watch this video.